Hello, everybody. It is Parker Johnson with Calgary Community of Christ, and I'm here to go over briefly the Building Transition Survey results. This presentation took place live the first time on February 25th, 2017 at our location here in Calgary, and we had some great feedback. I just wanted to ensure that this was going to be recorded and a format that could be used throughout the process if we ever needed to go back to it in a technologically friendly way. This also helps to ensure that people who were unable to attend the meeting can kind of get caught back up on where we left off and where we're going. So just a few stats before we get started. This survey took place over the course of about a month. We had a month-long window in December of 2016 in which 51 respondents participated in this survey. Respondents were members and non-members alike, and I really was happy with that turnout. I felt like overall, we had more responses than I kind of expected, to be quite honest. So with that, I just wanted to get into the meat of the survey. So on to the next slide. Purpose and expected results of this survey. The purpose was quite obvious. We've been in a cooling off phase since selling the previous location, and the congregation really needed to take a step back and enjoy just being a congregation again. The last 5 years have been taken over by difficult conversations, lots and lots of meetings, and a very exhaustive process for the leadership team, especially to get to the sale and the ultimate moving out of the building that we had before. So we've since leased a temporary space at Lions Village in Calgary. That has all gone well, and we really felt that we needed a few months to cool off prior to doing this survey, which we waited, and this survey was done, as we said, in December of 2016. Since I'm taking over as property chair, I'm picking up where the sale process ended. So the 8 steps for the sale process have been completed. We have found a temporary space, and now we are moving into the acquisition phase, which, believe it or not, we have 8 steps for that as well. So I will be carrying out that whole process in a project management type style, and I was brought in specifically for that purpose, to be as objective as possible for the Calgary congregation, to hear all sides and figure out what the best solution is going to be for everyone. So the online format that we chose for this survey, I really picked on purpose. I wanted to be as intentional as possible about the way in which we went about getting people's feedback. And I really think it worked quite well. We had 51 respondents. People could participate from anywhere in the world. They just had to click the link and fill in their answers. Some people did request paper ballots, if you will. I printed those off and distributed them. They were still submitted anonymously. And I still don't know who anyone's answers belong to. So I really think it went quite well. And it's important to note that these results, while we're not chained to them, we know that we will grow and develop as a community as we learn more from different experts, various architects or realtors. These are measurable responses that we can actually take from here and move towards our next step in the 8-step acquisition process. So this at least gives me some idea of what the congregation wants. And that's really helpful for me to have this in some sort of verifiable, quantifiable way that I can actually move forward, rather than just various conversations with people and me kind of filling in the blanks. I did not want to do that. I am not from Calgary, and I did not want to take that away from members and non-members alike. So that is the purpose, and I do feel like we have our expected results definitely moving along quite well. So with that, I'm going to move into our first slide. I'm going to skip how to read this report since I am reading it for you. Okay, respondent overview. We had 74% of respondents as members, 13% identified as local friends of the congregation, 2% identified as non-local friends of the congregation, and 11% selected other. Other fell into various categories, some being such as members who no longer live in Calgary but are technically still on the books in Calgary, who may or may not have felt comfortable having a full say in what's going on here since they don't physically live here anymore. So that's kind of that other category. I felt it was really important to find out our organizational memory here for the next one. The previous engagement question, I wanted to know who was involved in the sale process so that we could learn from them. They have a wealth of knowledge from that 8-step process as we move into the acquisition phase. So I asked the question, it read exactly, were you involved in the sale of the Ranch Lands facility? And I believe some people mistook that to be more of a question of, did you agree with the sale? As a lifelong member of Community of Christ, I could read some of the survey responses. Again, they were anonymous. I can't pick I can't tell you who they were exactly. But based on some of the other responses in each person's survey, I could tell that they were obviously members. They were obviously involved in the sale because they were referring to various steps in that sale process. But I think they chose no in the facility sale and them being involved in the sale of the facility because they said they felt like they didn't agree with it, so no, they weren't involved. Just so you know, that's the difference there. I wasn't actually asking if you agreed. I was just asking if you were involved in any way, shape, or form. So that really could have just meant you were involved in discussions. Maybe there was a committee created. Maybe you attended the actual business meeting where the vote was taken. So anything like that, that was actually what I was asking for. So I really think that 51% as not being involved in the sale really should hover around 45, 46%. That said, that means that 46% of our respondent base are new voices that we didn't have at the table before. So I'm really excited about that. I think that that really helps us have more opinions, more expertise brought to the table, and we're only going to be better because of it. So that was the reason that I asked that question. Moving along. The lease or purchase question read exactly, when considering a new location for the Calgary congregation, do you feel most comfortable with purchasing or leasing? 61% of respondents said purchase, 10% said lease, and 29% said undecided. And on the right side of each one of these graphs, you'll see a breakdown of the types of responses. So the different groupings that each person identified as will break down on the right. So we can see how members voted, how non-members voted, and others just the same. So that'll be how the format of each slide will look. So again, that's the overall respondents' input there on the left, and then on the breakdown, you'll see that on the right. So by and large, members and most folks all agree purchase on this question. So the outcome being that the purchase for the next property will be satisfying about 2/3 of respondents. It's a pretty good majority. And just to give you a little bit of information on the undecided folks, some of them really were kind of just not sure. They just wanted more information about, okay, well, could it be a long-term lease? Could it be that if we have this type of situation, we could do this? If whatever's best financially were some of the responses. Depends on the purpose and the business case for use of our resources. So there's lots of different options that people put in that undecided category. But ultimately, I was looking for yeses and nos. So these more firm responses were the ones that I was measuring. So that is the outcome of lease or purchase. All right, projected length of time at the new location. So the original question read, when considering a new location for the Calgary congregation, how long do you project we will need this space? Now, 9% of respondents said 1 to 5 years, 28% said 5 to 10 years, 35% said 10 to 15 years, and 28% said 15 or more years. So this breakdown was quite interesting to me. Most people kind of hovered around the 10 to 15 years area. I say interesting because the non-members kind of were all over the place. There really wasn't any trend that I could see there, except for those in the others category were very much in favor of a longer term. Members by and large were at 10 to 15 years though. So the outcome of that being that a time frame of 10 to 15 or more years would satisfy 93% of respondents. So again, a pretty good majority there. So let me explain what this is that you're looking at. This is what we call a word cloud. And in my professional background, these are used for a variety of reasons. But in this one, it was an open-ended response to the question, what key activities do you see being held in this new space? So people were listing tons and tons and tons of things that there was just no way for me to put this into one slide. So what I did was a word cloud. And a word cloud essentially takes a large amount of text and, depending on the frequency of a particular word, enlarges the words that appear the most. So as you can see, Sunday, church, community, services, outreach, worship, those larger words were mentioned the most. As you kind of fan out from there, you can see other words that are much smaller that have been mentioned, but maybe not as many times. So I'll just read you the top 10 that were mentioned. Community, church services, Sunday, events, small groups, outreach, worship, meetings, education, and meditation. And again, you can see tons and tons of other things outside of this, such as funerals, movies, flexibility, family, retreats. So take a look at this because it's got a lot of great information of what kind of where other people's minds are at for the best use of this space. All right, now we're moving on into worship area capacity. So the original question read, ideally, how many people should a new worship or main meeting room space accommodate? Let's see, let's start with the 16%. 16% of respondents said 1 to 50 people. 52% of respondents said 50 to 75. 25% of respondents said 75 to 100, and 7% said 100. And on the right side, you can see the breakdown. Members, by and large, were between 50 and 75. There were a few more that carried on. The next most popular choice was 75 to 100 for members. Local friends were choosing much smaller. And again, I think that's the value of having this breakdown for us, so we can see kind of how people's experiences with the congregation are impacting their responses. So in this particular question, the outcome was that a worship area with a capacity between 50 to 100 would satisfy 75% of respondents, which I think is a good meeting size. And as mentioned in my face-to-face presentation, I think we've been used to having a larger space for our Sunday morning services, but perhaps we should be adjusting our mindset here, and rather than having a a sanctuary that would seat 200, for example, what if we tried to get 200 people in our building throughout the week? So we don't always have to have 1 million people that could just fit in one space one time a week. Why don't we have multiple opportunities for them to gather into a smaller space that's a bit more personal and warm and inviting, that we can actually have more activities throughout the week and get more people in the door. So don't be discouraged by the lower numbers if you're thinking, well, I was thinking more of a larger space would be better. We really have to kind of think creatively here about the best bang for our buck on how to fill a space. Let's see. I just want to read some of these comments that I got at the face-to-face meeting as well. Someone asked a good question, but what's worship going to even look like? So we have these, 10 to 15 years down the road, what is our Sunday morning worship even going to be like? What would our seating arrangement be? I'm doubting that we would have pews. I'm not going to make that claim for sure, but it could be that we're at round tables. It could be that we are facing forward at just in regular seats that we kind of arrange in however we like and have a flexible seating space. All those things impact the square footage of the space. So those were good questions to ask. Another comment actually was that light and windows are very important to this individual, and that actually the move from Ranchlands has provided a great deal of energy to the congregation, and maybe the movement, maybe the freedom, I think he used the word liberating. It was liberating to move from Ranchlands to where we are right now in our temporary location. So I think as we move forward into this process of designing, keep all those things in mind, because those aesthetics are really going to be important as we meet with architects and realtors to decide what's best going to suit our needs, because we want to feel comfortable in that space, and we also want to make sure that our guests feel comfortable in that space and that they understand who we are because of that physical representation. All right, on to spatial needs. So the original question read, ideally, how many classrooms or small meeting rooms are needed to comfortably or adequately fulfill our mission? And the next few slides, I'm going to have a follow-up that I really felt like I saw a trend from. So bear with me here. It seems kind of all over the place, but there's a point to this, I promise. So starting here, 21% of respondents said 2 rooms would suffice, 51% said 3, 14% said 4, and 14% said 5 as well. And then the breakdown, members by and large felt like 3 was a better number. Interestingly enough, local friends of the congregation, a lot of them voted for, I'd say 80% voted for 5 rooms. So different way of thinking about how to utilize space that I think a lot of conversations should really kind of focus on whenever we're meeting together face to face. Why did you think that? What were your kind of ideas surrounding what the purpose of each room would be? All those types of things. Discussions, all that dialogue is really going to help. So the outcome of this was that having no more than 4 rooms would satisfy 86% of respondents. And hang in there, because that might have been a stretch for some people, that outcome. But again, I think we are kind of all heading in the same direction once I get to the next couple slides. So again, on spatial needs, the original question read, based on your response to the previous question, please indicate the purposes you have in mind for these classrooms and small meeting rooms. So in this question, I was forcing people to explain to me why they would need this many rooms. Defend your reasoning. And so 28% of folks said youth classroom was very important. 20% said adult classroom was very important. 13% said a study space was incredibly important. 22% said a young adult space was important. And 17% said other. And under that other, there were various reasons, such as a nursery, a prayer, meditation, or pastoral room, storage space, or a food service area. And this particular question, people could vote multiple times. So the lack of cohesion here is really just the fact that people were voting multiple times and they could, there's not going to be a sweeping majority on here. So youth classroom won out, but not by a ton. Next up was young adult space and then adult classroom after that. And I really feel like in general, most of the other groups voted similarly to the members. I don't see any trends really aside from the members' majority votes here. So the outcome being that the creation of a youth classroom, a young adult space, and an adult classroom would satisfy 71% of respondents. All right, and here is where I'm going to explain the trend that I am seeing. Again, still on spatial needs, the original question was, based on your response to question number 7, the previous slide that we saw, please indicate the capacity of persons per room. So by and large, the average was 15 persons per room, and we decided on youth classroom, young adult space, and an adult classroom. I'm just gonna throw it out there. These last 3 slides, I feel like we're all over the place. I don't think we really tend to know what we need right now. And I think people are scared to not mention everything. We're moving from a 16,000 square foot space down to whatever we choose. And we all are on the same page that we're not going to be getting another 16,000 square foot facility. But in our previous facility, we had tons of rooms you could label whatever you wanted. We had a pastor study, we had an office, we had all sorts of classrooms that all had specific purposes. And I can see that kind of thinking is still hanging on in these responses. But it begs the question for me, do these rooms need specific purposes? Rather, could you just have several rooms, say 3 rooms, that had names? You name the room like the temple room or the auditorium room, or whatever you want to call it, Emma Smith room, anything like that. And then you would reserve whatever room meets your needs best for whatever particular event. That way the room is not stuck being the youth room or the young adult room or the adult classroom. And really, I don't think 15 people you don't want 3 rooms of equal size in a facility. So I think these last 3 slides really show a lot to me that we need to have a lot more dialogue and discussion surrounding these spaces. And in our face-to-face meeting, it felt like we had a lot of discussion, a lot of agreement rather, that I think a room of maybe 5, that would fit 5 to 10, 15 to 20, and then 25 to 35-ish would be a really good way to have a wide range of spaces that would fit a lot of different needs. So, from Sunday to Sunday, we could have an adult Sunday class fluctuate from 10 to 20. So depending on how many people show up, just go to the room that fits your needs that Sunday. So these last three slides, I think, show that we need to have a lot more conversations on the spatial needs of the specific smaller rooms, the classrooms. A lot of people discussed about an office, things like that. Those things come in later whenever we're talking about the office, the dedicated office space in a later slide. This was just asking about classrooms and kind of the traditional church rooms that you would see in most congregations in Community of Christ. So at least with what this said, the outcome of this particular slide was that having a maximum capacity of 15 persons per room would satisfy more than 90% of respondents. Going back to what I was saying, we're not chained to this survey, and I think this is a perfect example of why. We just haven't quite figured out what's going to work best because we're going from such a large space to potentially a smaller space, and we need to think it through better. So. All right, on to the dedicated office space. So the original question read, ideally, would you like to see a dedicated office space in the new location? And this was interesting. A lot of members skipped this question, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. But local friends carried this one. If you see on the graph on the right, local friends, by and large, selected that they definitely wanted a dedicated office space. So on the left side, we'll go back to the all responses. 57% of respondents said yes, they wanted a dedicated office space. 9% said no, and 34% said maybe. And within that maybe, a lot of people were discussing, well, could you combine it with another room? Is there a way that we could just piggyback off of another room? That way we wouldn't have to have a dedicated room. So maybes had a lot of responses like that. Again, I don't know why a lot of members skipped this question, but they did for whatever reason. So with that said, members have the voting rights. So based on that, maybe wins out from members, but from the outcome of the general survey, nearly 2/3 of respondents fully supported a dedicated office space. So keep that in mind. There is a difference between those with voting rights and not. This just helps us to get a clearer picture of what everyone's thinking that's a part of our community. All right. Moving on to level of support for social area. The original question read, when considering a new space for the Calgary congregation, how important is a lobby or social area dedicated to conversation, fellowship, etc.? And let's start with the important. 25% of respondents said important. 59% of respondents said it was very important. 9% of respondents said it was somewhat important, and 7% said that they were on the fence. And if you go to the right side on the breakdown, members and most everybody, by and large, were on the very important side. So it's no question that the outcome of this was that the creation of a social area would satisfy 83% of respondents. That's a great majority. All right, on to social area capacity. The original question read, based on your response to question number 11, which was the previous slide, please indicate the capacity of persons in this space. So we're talking about the social area capacity that so overwhelmingly won out. So let's see, 2% of respondents said 10 to 15, 19% of respondents said 15 to 20, 22% of respondents said 20 to 30, 33% of respondents said 30 to 50, and 24% of respondents said 50 or more. It was a bit all over the place on this one. But again, most of the groups voted kind of alike. So 30 to 50 won out by the members' vote. And then on either side of that, you see the 50 or more and the 20 to 30. So I was able to discern that an accommodating 50 or fewer persons would satisfy 80% of the congregation. So again, we're looking at majorities and the best trends that we can find to make sure that the most people that we can get can be as happy as possible. That's the goal here. All right, transportation and parking. This question originally read, ideally, what do you foresee our needs to be regarding access and parking? And I'll read the disclaimer here. It said, note, Calgary Community of Christ will comply with all accessibility laws, such as wheelchair access, ramps, washroom modifications, etc. So this question is specific to things such as, but not limited to, parking, proximity to public transit options, trails, etc. So we're really talking about access from the outside in for the community. And let's start here with bike trails. So 3% of respondents said that being near a bike trail would be important. 26% said being near public transit was important. 24% said having a drop-off area close to the entrance was important. 25% said that a parking lot or dedicated spaces were very important. And 15% said street parking was very important. 7% gave us an other answer. Others usually said multiple of all of the above or things like that. So not exactly the most helpful data, but data nonetheless. So going to the breakdown side, public transit won out barely, followed by parking lots and or dedicated spaces, and then closely followed by drop-off close to the entrance. So public transit, parking lot, dedicated spaces, and a drop-off access near the entrance would satisfy 75% of respondents. And you know, I mentioned this in the face-to-face presentation that I gave. When we've come from this ownership model, and I think that we're moving towards another ownership model. People tend to agree that we're not leasing; we want to buy. That doesn't mean that we have to own our parking lot or that we have to do anything to have a bike trail. It's just, that's really much about location. Say there's a parkade next to us or a business next to us that would agree to allow us to use their spaces on Sundays or evenings or various events that we have throughout the week. Then we really would just need to sign a contract with them to have those available to us. And then we're not on the hook for snow removal and repaving and repainting the lines and other maintenance things that a lot of our facilities people have had to deal with over the years. A big goal of mine is to have burden reduction is a big focus of mine. I really cannot move forward knowing that we are going to put a big burden on anybody. I really just want to think these things through as much as possible so that we have an easy transition, and that when folks are able to come to church, they're actually coming to church and they're not exhausted by being there. So I was really happy with these responses. The fact that public transit won out means that people are really forward thinking. I mean, we're talking about the future here. People of all socioeconomic statuses are taking public transit, and it doesn't matter if we're going to be wherever in the city. Access is going to be huge. So I really, 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 really was happy with this response. All right, location. The original question read, what type of location would best serve the Calgary community while meeting our needs to promote church mission? By and large, all respondents, by and large respondents, 64% said central. 3% said downtown, and 33% said residential. Nobody voted for industrial. So on the right side, you can see the breakdown. Most groups voted similarly. The others category was moving more towards the residential side. But other than that, it was a sweeping majority for central. So that's a 2/3 majority. That's a great sign that people are kind of thinking similarly about the next steps for us. I should mention the boundaries for what central means have not quite been drawn yet. Someone mentioned that they read that as central being central to the congregants that are meeting right now. That was not my intention. My intention was central Calgary of the city. So what we were discussing at the face-to-face meeting was drawing those boundary lines. I've seen online, I've done some research with the city of Calgary. They have kind of a definition of what central Calgary is. I'm happy to pull from that. And I think a lot of the people that were face-to-face were in agreement that, I believe it was from 16th Ave north, south to 17th Ave south, and then east to Deerfoot and west to Crowchild was a good corridor to kind of call central for us. But I'll be following that up with a bit more clarity once we figure out the next steps. But that is kind of what we were thinking when we said central. All right, level of support for shared space. So the original question read, when considering a new space for the Calgary congregation, should we consider and plan for compatible groups or activities to share our space in an effort to offset operating expenses? And it was a sweeping majority. 77% of respondents said yes, 23% said no. When you break down on the right, most people are voting yes, whether you're members or not. I think that the ones who said no, some of the responses were being cautious the risk management factors to take into consideration from World Church, such as insurance and things like that. People were mostly just cautious about the fact that they didn't want to give up all of our rights to the building throughout the week. Someone mentioned that, you know, it'd be difficult to plan a wedding in our previous space because of our renter situation and the fact that we had other people in there throughout the week that we had to suddenly become secondary. And we need to make sure that we come first in our own space. So I think some of the no's were more just cautious. Probably could have been a maybe, but I didn't give that option. So I was really pleased with the fact that people are open to looking into compatible groups. Many said that they needed to be in line with our mission, our enduring principles, things like that. So I think once we get closer to this step, we need to ensure that we are able to figure out a way to vet organizations, other churches, what have you, to be able to ensure that they'd fit our expectations and that they'd fit in with our mission and enduring principles. One other thing to mention here, someone had a great point, was as we move forward, to not plan or rely on sharing a space to offset financial burdens. We should be buying within our means and ensuring that we are capable of fulfilling all of our financial responsibilities without feeling the pressure to fill that space with a renter throughout the week. And I think that's important. We don't want to feel that we're chained to, that we have to find somebody to rent in order that we can just keep the door open. So I think we're all on the same page with that. And that was just a really good comment that someone had at the face-to-face presentation. All right, with that, we are nearing the end of our survey presentation here. So these are just the summaries here. So overall, respondents said that a purchase of a new facility would be best and that it was expected to be needed for 10 to 15 plus years. The worship area should accommodate 50 to 100. We talked about the classrooms. This is a larger discussion that needs to continue, but this is what the survey said. 3 classrooms, small meeting rooms, those being youth classroom with 10 to 15 people capacity, young adult space 10 to 15, and an adult classroom for 10 to 15 people as well. By and large, all respondents said a dedicated office space was important. Again, for just going from the members who have voting rights, that was a maybe. So we'll continue to keep that in mind. Lobby and a social area was deemed to be very important. That would hold 30 to 50 people. Regarding transportation, this is an order of support near public transit. Having a parking lot or dedicated spaces was important, and a drop-off area near the entrance was also important. Location was overwhelmingly voted to be central in Calgary. And lastly, the congregation should consider sharing space with compatible groups and or activities as we see fit. So that's kind of the overall summary of this survey results. So what is next? Here are those beautiful 8 steps that I was talking about at the very beginning. Okay, so we are on step 1. You can see it's red here on the left. These are the 8 steps in the acquisition process. I'll let you read them here, but I'm really going to be over-communicating throughout this process. I do not want anyone to be coming to me and saying, I had no idea that was happening. Keeping in mind that once we start working with and collaborating with other professionals in their areas, such as architects and realtors, things can change on a daily basis. And so I will be sending out communications, particularly via email, but on Sunday mornings, face-to-face in church, I will be making announcements as needed. So stay up to date. Be as present and available as possible, because I'm going to be trying to come to all of you as much as I can to get feedback throughout the process. If you have any questions or anything, I'm happy to speak with you. If you have anybody within your network that you think would be helpful to speak with, I am happy to take down their information and to take it to them. Other than that, this is going to be a very streamlined process that I'm really excited about. I have full support from the leadership team. They've been incredibly helpful in polishing even this presentation and making sure that it would be as meaningful and easy to interpret as possible. And I definitely have them to thank for that. So I think, yep, oops, that is it. As far as this survey presentation goes, I am all through. Please feel free to write me. My email is parker@communityofchrist.ca. and I'm happy to get in touch with you and answer any specifics you might have. Overall, I think that I saw a lot of majority, I saw a lot of consensus from within this particular survey. There'll be more to come once we get on other topics such as mission, and when we're talking about specifics within the space that we need to discuss. But other than that, I really just look forward to putting all this stuff down on paper. So I'm going to back up here. Let me see, between review survey and engage architect, I'm actually going to put this down into a narrative. I really think it's important that we document everything that we're doing as a congregation. If you think even a couple generations down the road, if they stop to think, okay, how did we end up in this space, wherever they are, they can be able to they'll be able to pick up this document and read through, these are the steps that we took to get here and why. This is the feedback that we got. This is the market study we had at the time. These were the architects we worked with. Here's the firm that we had. Here are the realtors that we worked with. And I think that all those things are going to be truly important to our future members, as well as other congregations around the world who might come to us and say, hey, can you tell us what you did to get where you are? I can just fire this off to them and they can read through our own kind of narrative and our story. So I'll put this survey results into a story form, and I'll be distributing that as well. So you'll have that to look forward to. I think it'll be important for me to have that done prior to engaging an architect, because I think it's only going to be helpful for them to understand who we are and why we are where we are right now. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And again, let me know if you have any questions, and I'm here to help. Cool. Take care, guys. Bye.